Welcome to the Sarah Finkelstein Show, where the next 10 minutes can change your life. Also on Spotify, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio. Here's Sarah.
Good afternoon. Today's topic that I want to talk about is same average returns with different outcomes. Something to think about. So I'm looking at a couple of pages that I printed out about this specific topic. And it has to do with something that we refer to in the industry as sequence of returns. Again, that is sequence of returns. So in this particular example, we have three individuals that are age 40, and they all put in $1 million into their retirement nest egg. They all average 7% return on their money. Now, during this time period, they do not take any withdrawals and they do not make any further contributions. It is just a $1 million deposit. And what happens is for all three of them, they end up with, at the age of 65, after 25 years of having that $1 million invested, they all end up with the same amount of money at the end of the rainbow, and that amount is $5,434,372. Now, let me explain the differences that these individuals encountered. Mrs. Jones had very good returns in the beginning years after she made her initial deposit. Mr. Smith had some negative returns in the beginning years after he made his initial deposit. And Mr. Brown had 7% return each and every year. It was very steady and very predictable, which typically we know the market is not predictable. But for illustration purposes and to make the point, regardless of the fact that they all ended up with the same amount of money at the end of the period, and they all averaged 7% return, what's the big deal, right? Well, in many cases, no big deal. However, if Mr. Smith, who had the negative returns in the beginning, if he decided to cash out somewhere along the way, he might have gotten to take out a lot less, or he may have ended up with less money than, say, Mrs. Jones, who started out getting positive returns in the beginning years. So if their plan was indeed over the 25 years to just leave the money there to grow for their retirement, then it really didn't matter what happened. It didn't matter if the market was up or the market was down, because they averaged 7% return. And again, they all ended up with the same amount of money at the age of 65. But how many of us know that we're never going to need to touch the money over that time period of 25 years? I mean, that is the goal, of course, when you're saving for your retirement years, but one never knows what might come along the way. So in my book, which is, I'll show you my book, Wisdom for Women, Discover the Challenges You Must Overcome to Live the Life and Retirement You Deserve. A lot of great tidbits in this very short book, only about 100 pages. There is an example of what we're talking about today, the sequence of returns. I would like to take a moment to thank you to TRC Voiceovers for the fine work that you've done with our voiceover here on the Sarah Finkelstein Show. So now let's fast forward to your retirement years. We have learned that it makes a world of difference once you are in retirement or getting very close to retirement. So similar example as before, but now we have Mrs. Doe, Mr. White, and Mr. Rush. And they are age 65, all of them. And they deposit $1 million into their retirement nest egg. Now, each one of them, again, averages over that time period of their retirement years, 7% return is the average. They each take out $60,000 from their retirement nest egg to meet their standard of living, to maintain their standard of living. But because they're taking money out of their nest egg, it makes a world of difference what happens at the end of the rainbow. And in this particular case, we are using age 90 as the end of the rainbow. So Mrs. Doe had favorable returns in the beginning years. Mr. White had bad returns in the beginning of his retirement years. And Mr. Rush had 7% return each and every year, just like our previous example. So what happens to Mrs. Doe, Mr. White, and Mr. Rush at the age of 90? Now remember, Mrs. Doe had the positive returns in the beginning of her retirement years. So at age 90, she ended up with $1,099,831. Let's just call it $1.1 million is what she was left with at the age of 90. She started out with $1 million. She took out $60,000 a year. She had positive returns in the beginning, a few negative returns along the way, and she ended up with 1.1 at the age of 90. Now, Mr. White, he had negative returns in the beginning of his retirement. And remember, all these two individuals, Mrs. Doe and Mr. White, they had the same returns in just different order, a different sequence. So Mr. White, because he had the negative returns in the beginning of his retirement, and he was continuing to take out that $60,000 a year, he ended up with $0. In other words, he exhausted all of his money at the age of 89. So at the age of 89, he had nothing left in his retirement nest egg. Now, is it possible that Mr. White could live to 95 or even 100? And the answer is yes. He certainly can live beyond age 89. And for example, my husband's grandmother is 99. And if you put your thinking cap on, you probably know some people that are well into their 90s and maybe even beyond 100 or close to it. So again, Mr. White ended up with 0. Not a good place to be. Mr. Rush is the one that had the same 7% each and every year. And he ended up with $430,323 at the age of 90. So he did a lot better than Mr. White, who had those negative returns in the beginning, but he did not do as well as Mrs. Doe, who had the positive years in the beginning of her retirement. So remember, she ended up with 1.1 million and Mr. Rush ended up with $430,000. A lot better though than Mr. White, who ran out of money at the age of 89. So the moral of the story is when you are close to retirement or even in retirement, it is not wise to have all of your money in the market where you could lose it. When you're putting money away for your retirement years and you're not touching that money, then it really doesn't matter what the sequence of your returns are. But in retirement, it does matter. So I have this chart. If you want a copy of it, text me and I'll be happy to send it to you. I wish there was an easy way that I could show it to you on the screen, but I was not able to do that. But I have it right here. So if you want a copy, I'm more than happy to send it to you. And also, we are into almost the end of June. How do you know you're on the right track to meet your financial goals, whatever they may be? Well, let me give you a free report that you can download. Just go to www.financialfitnessforever.com and you'll be able to download a free report right there. Again, it's www.financialfitnessforever.com. And if you have any questions or need a second opinion on what you're doing, I'm here to help.
Knowledge is power, but only when you implement what you've learned to your own benefit. Tune in next time for even more powerful tips on the Sarah Finkelstein Show.